rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events, this is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Perspective. I am your host, Rick. Oh, last night was a fun time. I had a really fun time, and I appreciate the fact that you guys were, well, not that you necessarily allow me to go, but that you were appreciative of the fact that I was going. I mean, when the missus asked for a night out, you kind of sort of have to go with it. Anyway. We ended up going with with another couple. So it was two couples. The two couples, that went, or the other couple that went with us, they are, members in a winery that is local, fairly local. I mean, it's 2 hours away, but anyway, they have a membership to this winery. And so they get to go to, and occasionally invite guests to come and go to like wine tastings, and you get specialty labeled wines, things that are not available to the general public, that they hold for certain people and that kind of stuff. And if you like some of the wines that are being tasted, you can go ahead and purchase bottles or cases at special discounts, so on and so forth. And, they do offer food there too, but we didn't partake in the food because we actually went to dinner afterward. I'm mostly a whiskey drinker, bourbon drinker, Irish whiskey. Those bourbon and Irish whiskey seem to be my two faves. And so that being said, I do drink beer occasionally. I do drink wine occasionally. I like the wine. I like wine, occasionally. And, we ended up tasting a couple of really good wines. One of them, we ended up getting, splitting a case with our hosts. And so it's, the winery is called Chateau Saint-Michel, Chateau Saint-Michel. And, of course, that actually works because, never mind. Mrs. Whiskey loves wine. And we ended up becoming members as well. So now we're probably going to be having some more nights out, per se, to go to special wine tastings and stuff. Plus, I've got a couple other things that are going through my head in terms of this particular connection for everything. So yeah. Anyway. It was a great time. We went out, we had drinks, we went and had dinner. I didn't have to drive, which was fantastic. And neither did Mrs. Whiskey. So we had a wonderful time. We came back with a bunch of wine, and we're probably going to have a bottle or two of it, maybe a bottle tonight, with dinner, while Mrs. Whiskey is making us some wonderful dinner, for us tonight. And of course, we're prepping up for next week. So if any of you are attempting to listen to the Dallas Moore Outlaw Radio right now, it is not necessarily offline, but it's not playing anything at the moment, and that is on purpose. So just letting you all know, it will be coming back on the 7th. Again, the debut. We've done our check runs. We've done all of our testing. We've made sure that the server stays up and active, that the crossfades sound good. All of that has passed, and so now we're getting all kinds of things, other things locked in, like show times. There may be a surprise in that coming up in the near future. Show times and things like that, getting all set up for it. And yes, I do understand there are wineries elsewhere. Bonnie has pointed out there are wineries in Kentucky also. Yeah, well, I understand that. And that is one of the reasons why when we finally get all of the final stuff put together for the trip, that's one of the things that we're doing, because not everybody likes whiskey and bourbon. I mean, let's be honest, it's different tastes for different folks across the board. And so, we've got to cater to a number of tastes and tastings within the group. So, we're looking at that as well. So, there's Castle Winery, take that under advisement. Bonnie for it, Castle Winery. So there you go. All right. So really quickly, before we kick everything off, I just want to say I am aware of the nationwide protests. They are hands off. Oh no, Bonnie, no. You and Mrs. Whiskey don't get to go together alone. Not going to happen. Anyway, so oh yeah, Nana, I know it's yeah, I'm aware of there's California wines too. I actually brought a couple bottles of wine back when I took a business trip down to California many years ago for it. But anyway, okay, so I've heard of the protests. Haven't heard of anything in terms of, things being burnt, crushed, people getting beat up. Haven't heard of anything no violence, but apparently the name of the protest is Hands Off. And what they're pointing at, reportedly, is hands off, like Elon Musk, hands off Donald Trump from all of our services, the Department of Education, all of these other things. Well, you know what? I actually started thinking about it when Mrs. Whiskey was telling me about this, because she played me a couple videos. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I could probably join that protest. I mean, not as an agitator, but to be with them when they're talking about hands off. I mean, they're throwing everything into it. Hands off our bodies, hands off this, hands off that, hands off everything. How about government hands off Americans? How about that? How about that? I mean, if I want to join a hands off protest, I might as well be hands off of everything. Hands off our money, hands off our wallets, hands off our lives, hands off our private business, hands off our private information, which, there's so much that the government gathers on us. That to me would be perfect hands off protest. And I'm sure that those people would have been welcoming for that. Maybe not. Anyway, yeah, I'm sorry. I just found that funny. They were hands off of everything, but, hands, how about, I got it. How about hands off the family unit? How about hands off of Christianity? How about hands off of our border control that Trump has put in? How about that? How about hands off our sovereignty as a nation? How about hands off our ability to protect ourselves? How about hands off our ability to, drive the kind of car that we want, whether it's a gas guzzler or an electric vehicle, don't care which. How about that? How about hands off my income? How about hands off my Social Security in terms of taxes? How about hands off from an overbearing government? Again, I bring this back. Yeah, that's the whole point. Buddy's over here saying hands on illegals, hands on Department of Education. What I mean, Buddy, by this is just that the government needs to get out of things like the Department of Education. We need to have a border. We need to have, low taxes, low regulations, limited government, small government, all in accordance with the Constitution of the United States, as well as the 10th Amendment. So, anyway, I could join that protest. Sure. Hands off. Yeah. Yeah. Hands off of the American people. So there you go. Anyway. All right. Enough about this. Let's get things kicked off and started here. Let's go with, BAM is up. BAM is up for tonight's Pledge of Allegiance. So if you are of mine, please stand, remove your hat if you're wearing one like me, and place your hand over your heart and follow along with BAM as she recites the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And, of course, I do appreciate that. Bam. Wonderful rendition. If you would like to hear your rendition of the pledge played here on the program, all you need to do is record yourself performing the pledge in your style, and then take that audio or video file or whatever kind of file that is, it's correct, that is, produced by your recording, and take that file, attach it to an email, and send it off to fans, FANS, at AmericanPerspective.online. That's fans at AmericanPerspective.online. All right. First things first, we have a wonderful segment, fan favorite segment for tonight, which is On This Day in American History. And of course, for On This Day in American History, we read from the American Patriots Almanac, written by William J. Bennett and John T.E. Cribb, chock full of all kinds of factoids about our wonderful, wonderful country and nation that we call home. Tonight, we're going to talk about one of my favorite times in American history, albeit how short it was. We're going to talk about the Pony Express. On this day in 1860, two young, skinny, wiry fellows were galloping on fast horses across a great western frontier. One headed west, the other headed east, on the very first run of the Pony Express. Before the Pony Express, it took weeks, if not months, for letters to get between the eastern and western parts of the country. Can somebody tell us what has become of the U.S. mail for this section of the world? That was the Los Angeles Star asking in 1853, noting that it had been some 4 weeks since it had arrived. It took a long time to get that stuff going. The Pony Express promised delivery between St. Joseph's, Missouri, the western terminal of the nation's rail system, and Sacramento, California, in 10 days or less. The Pony Express network was a masterpiece of organizations covering a 1,966-mile route with 190 relay stations set roughly 10 to 15 miles apart. A rider carrying up to 20 pounds of mail galloped as fast as he could to the next station, where he leapt onto a fresh horse and headed on. About every 8 stations, a new rider would take over. The system used 400 horses and 80 riders, who were each paid $25 a week to face the empty wilderness, howling blizzards, scorching sun, and occasional Indian attacks. It is said that a Pony Express advertisement read, "Wanted Young, skinny, wiry fellows not over 18 must be expert riders willing to risk death daily. Orphans preferred. The first riders left St. Joseph and Sacramento on April 3rd, 1860. On April 13th, the westbound mail arrived in Sacramento, beating the eastbound delivery by 2 days. 10 days to cross the West was like lightning in 1860, but the era of the Pony Express was to be short-lived. On October 24th, 1861, the Transcontinental Telegraph opened, and 2 days later, the Pony Express went out of business and passed into an American legend. That is today's On This Day in American History. Fantastic thought process went into that. And of course, you know, the American entrepreneurial spirit kicked that thing off, but it was very short-lived because technology took over. Oh, all right. One thing I forgot to do in the beginning was to basically tell you that what I'm drinking tonight. Tonight I am in the Knob Creek Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey. And I am drinking it out of one of the glasses that were sent to me by my fantastic Whiskey Warrior P1s, saying it takes stones to drink with whiskey. And there are the stones in the bottom, right there, the bottom of the glass. Fantastic. Love that. All right. Oh, yes, buddy. The Pony Express was constitutional. Oh, buddy. Yeah. It was constitutional. The reason being is because Congress, that was one of the things that Congress in Article 1, Section 8 had as their things that they're supposed to do is create post roads and keep them open. So, yeah. Oh, all right. Well, let's go ahead and kind of get into it here. Oh, wait a minute. I also forgot to do one other thing too. And I know I did. I forgot to kick off the headline sponsor. Well, here we go. All right, the Institute on the Constitution for tonight. The Institute on the Constitution was established in 2004 as a 501c3 nonprofit with one singular mission, and that is to restore the constitutional republic through grassroots education. All courses and materials are developed using primary source documents and taught from the American view of law and government as defined in the Declaration of Independence in the following 3 key points. 1, there is a God. 2, our rights come from him. And 3, the purpose of civil government is to secure and protect our God-given rights. The IOTC offers the opportunity to educate yourself on our most precious founding document, the Constitution of the United States. They also provide tools to educate your community and get involved with local government. Start by taking their free U.S. Constitution course and go from there. Use my affiliate link, iotc.americanperspective.online, to sign up. And while you are there, take a moment to look through their other course material and information. My affiliate link, once again, is iotc.americanperspective.online to get great content to learn about our historical founding and support the show in the process. That's iotc.americanperspective.online. Or if you just want to purchase this fabulous Saddleback leather-bound U.S. Constitution to support the show, go to constitution.americanperspective.online. Check this thing out. It's got 1/8 of an inch of Saddleback leather wrapped around pages that are water and tear resistant. Check out that binding. No cheap glue here, folks. That is stitched all the way through the leather and the pages, wrapping everything together. It's got a 100-year warranty against materials and workmanship defects, such that if something goes wrong, you can send it back to the manufacturer and they will either fix it or replace it for free. It is buddy tested, buddy approved, Billy tasted, Billy approved. My youngest whiskey warrior has confirmed that the information contained within is good enough and accurate enough to help you study for your civics badge in scouting. Probably will also help you get your civics badge or civics test taken care of to. Go to constitution.americanperspective.online and get yours today. Also, don't forget to check out the rest of the Institute on the Constitution's offering, and I thank them for allowing me to be an affiliate. And, of course, my brumblers always say it has sexy, rounded corners. Well, speaking of constitutionality and the Constitution itself, the Supreme Court has decided to allow the Trump admin to freeze education grants over the DEI concerns. So the Trump administration filed a brief telling the justices that a federal judge in Massachusetts had exceeded his authority by interfering on what is essentially a contract dispute. Now, they went ahead and granted Trump's request to halt the reinstatement of millions of dollars in the Department of Education grants that the government targeted over concerns of diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Chief Justice John Roberts would have denied the administration's request for relief, according to a court document. Justice Elena Kagan issued a dissent, as did Ketanji Brown Jackson, as well as being joined by Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Why does that not surprise me any? Those three. Oh my gosh. So now the Supreme Court's order blocks another order from a federal judge in Massachusetts and keeps it on hold pending the outcome of an appeal to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit. The court indicated that it may grant certiorari or take up the case for more thorough consideration of the legal arguments that are involved. So, yeah, this is just, this is a good step. It's a good thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything. All it's saying is that the Supreme Court, the majority of the Supreme Court, have decided that they want things to kind of move through the process. Sooner or later, all of this stuff is going to hit the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court's going to have to make a decision, scarily enough, on all of this stuff. In its unsigned opinion, the Supreme Court seemed concerned that the federal government would face irreparable harm if it were forced to distribute the grants. It said that the plaintiffs in the case, which included 8 states, had not refuted the government's representation that it is unlikely to recover the grant funds once they are dispersed. Well, that's true. Anyway, the opinion added that the plaintiffs have represented in this litigation that they have the financial wherewithal to keep their programs running. So, there you go. Anyway. The opinion also stated that if the respondents ultimately prevail, they can recover any wrongly withheld funds through a suit in an appropriate forum, they said. Now, Kagan, of course, mentioned in her dissent that the court's reasoning is the least underdeveloped and very possible wrong. She added that nothing about this case demanded our immediate intervention. Yes, it did. Yes, it did. It absolutely did. This is a constitutional issue here, people. First of all, these federal judges, and I'm surprised that nobody, I'm kind of surprised the Supreme Court hasn't quite picked up on this or said anything about this outside of Alito and Clarence Thomas, where they're talking about how the lower courts have stepped outside of their constitutional boundaries by issuing these what are considered to be blanket injunctions. Again, the nationwide order or blanket injunctions like this, they're not supposed to be there. There is no constitutionality. Nothing in the Constitution that says the courts have this ability, the lower courts have this ability to do this on the presidency. Now, again, I argue the Supreme Court does because it is the third branch of government and has the ability to do that. Whether or not they should, that's another argument for another day. But the point being is that they're the only ones that should technically have the constitutional authority to do that in any situation. The lower courts, which are created by Congress, the other branch, the legislative branch of the American government, has no authority over the president of the United States, who is, of course, the third branch of government. So anyway, well, in terms of tariffs, so I'm switching gears here. We're going to talk about tariffs for a second because obviously the market reacted negatively to the tariffs. Okay. Now, I was talking on Thursday. The reality is the market has been overvalued for some time and realistically needed a course correction anyway. So yeah, it's it's a bit of a problem for that. And anyway, when Trump announced the tariffs, especially the ones on certain countries, China kind of took that negatively, which they should. And they retaliated with 34% tariffs on U.S. goods. Now, their tariffs are going to come into effect on April 10th. Our tariffs, the 10% ones just recently came in on it. So there you go. But China announced a raft, according to the Epoch Times, a raft of additional tariffs and restrictions against American goods yesterday in retaliation of the sweeping tariffs imposed by the United States. Beijing said that from April 10th, it would impose additional tariffs of 34% on all American products. Okay. Don't know where that's, you guys, China isn't really buying a bunch of our stuff anyway. So why? I don't know. Maybe it'll affect us. Maybe it won't. I don't know. It's all of these tariffs and all of these things are like, they're supposed to balance the trade deficits that we have with these countries. And sort of like what you saw with Mexico and Canada, they import more of our goods than we import of theirs. Or no, I'm sorry, that was backwards. We import more of their goods than they import of ours. And so, by them assigning more tariffs to our goods, I'm not exactly sure the limited amount of money that we actually get from them in comparison is, it's probably not going to make much of an impact. So anyway, the Chinese Communist Party also unveiled controls on exports of medium and heavy rare earths, including samarium, gadolinium, terbium, dysprosium, lutetium, scandium, and yttrium to the United States, effective on Friday. So there you go. And yeah, Glow over on Rumble has it. China will hurt more than the U.S. Trump is only charging what they charge us, or a little less. He's actually charging many countries a little less. He's charging roughly, based on his announcement, he's putting on roughly half the amount of tariffs that they put on us. So, again, I don't know. We'll just have to kind of see again. And I'm being completely honest here. I'm in sort of a wait and see mode because of the fact that, yes, tariffs can trip off a trade war in certain cases. And whether or not the effects of that trade war are positive or negative or neutral, let's be honest, are still remain to be seen. However, we do know that the record with, Trump's record with the wielding of tariffs was positive in his first term in office. So to sit here and just discount and just say, oh yeah, Trump tariffs, they're going to hurt America no matter what. Yeah, I'm not quite in that camp either. And the reason being, of course, is because it worked the first time. It helped the first time. And there's positive signs of things working this time around, even though he's being a little more aggressive now than what he was in his first term. For an example, also from the Epoch Times, U.S. tariffs kick off negotiations as Vietnam pledges to reduce tariffs on the U.S. to zero. I mean, we have Mexico has backed off a little bit. We have Vietnam has backed off. Israel has backed off. There's many countries that are realizing that, hey, you know what? Yeah, this really doesn't make a lot of sense to us. And so, you know, they're willing to work with the Americans. Okay. They're willing to work with the Americans. And this is where I'm saying tariffs are a good thing. So I'm in the camp of the wait and see mode. But we knew this was coming. It's not like this is something that was, just all of a sudden popped up. I mean, he's been talking about this ever since he started running for his second term. And even before that, because again, anybody who paid attention during Trump's first term, they knew that Trump likes tariffs. He likes to utilize tariffs. And he utilized them in his first term fairly effectively. He impacted the economy in a positive way by using his tariffs. And again, like some people in my chat are pointing out, you know, if you don't buy from the countries that have tariffs on them, then yeah, the tariffs aren't going to impact you. I mean, basically, you know. So again, it's a question. It's really going to be a question, honestly. And you think of this as sort of like a poker table. It's whoever's going to blink first that's going to be the winner in all of this. Okay. So, yeah. Anyway, I mean, we're just going to have to kind of see what happens here with everything. Now, Trump also was fairly defiant on Friday here in Breitbart. And I'll go ahead and show you the article. Go ahead and show you the article here. Breitbart, defiant Trump dismisses stock market's tariff plunge. Now, of course, everybody's sitting here and jumping on the idea that the tariffs cause the stock market to plunge. I agree there is a correlation, but correlation doesn't necessarily equal causation. The thing about it is here, remember, like I said, the stock market has been overvalued in terms of the PE ratio, in terms of the Buffett indicator, in terms of, you know, all of the indicators that indicate what the stock market is actually doing. They are all saying the same thing. The stock market itself is overvalued. And so it has been due for a course correction for quite some time. Now, if Trump's tariffs kick off that course correction, that correction in the stock market, so be it. I mean, it's going to come down anyway. Besides, you really shouldn't be looking outside of day traders, which I don't even understand day traders necessarily because I don't do it. But the whole point and purpose of being in the stock market is to go for long-term gains. It's sort of like owning your own house. You know, back in the 2000s when the housing bubble burst, there were a lot of people that ended up being underwater because of the fact that they had loans that were overvalued at the time. The point is to make smart decisions as best you can with your money and to look at it from a long term. Okay? A long-term investment. If you're not planning on pulling your money out for another 5 years or so in the stock market, then you realistically don't have much to worry about because of the fact that the stock market is based on its historical, everything in its history. It will come back. It will come back. It's just a matter of time. And so, you know, again, he's looking at it and he dismisses the tariff plunge. You know, we'll have to see what happens on Monday, but realistically, I mean, we've been through this before. It has happened in the past. And so, yeah, we're just going to have to deal with this. So now, one thing that Trump did post on Truth Social about China putting on the 34% tariff, he goes, China played it wrong. They panicked. The one thing they cannot afford to do. So, again, for the second straight day, markets plunged. This was Thursday and Friday, wiping vast sums off investment and retirement portfolios alike. But don't forget, we had a vast drop in the market during the Biden administration that took out many people's 401k in terms of like cutting it off half. Okay. So again, if that money is truly invested for a long-term gain, this isn't something that you need to worry about. And in fact, when that happened back under the Biden administration, I didn't even really look at it anyway, because realistically, even if the value of the stock is at or just above what I initially invested in most people's 401ks anyway, you're getting a company match as it is. And that's money that you didn't have. So again, just be patient. Let's let this thing ride out. It's only been a couple of days. There's no reason to panic. Like Rush Limbaugh would say, it's never time to panic. But the point here is that, you should take rather than making an emotional decision on all of these things, you should take a more positive approach across this and say, look, it's going to go back up. It's just going to take some time. And that's all that it takes. Okay. So realistically, I mean, again, even though the stock market is going to go up and going to go down, I'm already telling you, the stock market's been overvalued as it has been, as it is for quite some time. So this tariff thing, realistically, maybe it kicked the market correction in quicker than what it was going to be. But again, it was on its way. It was going to anyway. So just accept it. Now, we did have a budget framework vote in the Senate that came through on Friday, late Friday. And the GOP, the Senate GOP, actually got it through, 51-48. Susan Collins and Rand Paul were the only two Republicans who decided to oppose the measure. And this was after a marathon vote series, according to Fox News. Excuse me. The Senate passed a framework for a sweeping bill promoting President Donald Trump's agenda after an hours-long series of amendment votes, during which Democrats sought to put Republicans on record with issues like tariffs and the Department of Government efficiency. It passed mostly along party lines, 51-48, around 2:30 a.m. Eastern Time this morning. Senators Susan Collins out of Maine and Rand Paul out of Kentucky were the only two Republicans to join the Democrats in opposing the measure. The amendment framework would raise the debt ceiling by up to $5 trillion within the reconciliation process, taking future leverage away from Senate Democrats. Well, that's part of the reason why they voted down. But it would also make Trump's 2017 tax cuts permanent by using what's called a current policy baseline that Budget Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham decides. So the scoring tool essentially means the cost of making Trump's tax cuts permanent would be factored in at zero, because it actually extends current policy rather than counting it as new dollars being added to the federal deficit. Okay? So some conservatives have signaled that they're wary of using that method, unfortunately. Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana said on the Senate floor ahead of the vote series, "I have been assured that there is a commitment and other ways to pay for the eventual reconciliation bill. Now, I am not saying that I think it is better that we use current policy as a baseline. It's never been done before in a setting like this. I think it establishes a dangerous precedent. It might be within the rules to do so, but it doesn't mean it's wise to do so, he said. Some other House conservatives have gone so far as to call it a gimmick. Senate GOP leaders made it clear that they were in lockstep behind that framework, however. Senate Majority Leader John Thune said on Friday evening, "This resolution is the first step towards a final bill to make permanent the tax relief we implemented in 2017 and deliver a transformational investment in our border, national, and energy security, all accompanied by substantial savings measures and common sense reforms to our government." Senator Majority Whip John Brasso from Wyoming said, "The American people gave us a mission and a mandate: secure borders, lower taxes, affordable energy, peace through strength, and of course, efficient, effective government. Senate Republicans' bold budget blueprint delivers." Well, they got it through. So budget reconciliation, of course, lowers the threshold in the Senate from 60 to 51. Keep in mind, if they had done this through a normal budget bill, it would have had the 60 vote threshold, which would have had to deal with the filibuster and everything else that goes along with it. So this reconciliation and doing it this way allows the Republicans to approve certain priorities with absolutely zero Democrat support. Washington's Republican trifecta thus sees reconciliation as a key tool for delivering on Trump's agenda items. So the Senate's Friday vote-a-rama was triggered by the chamber agreeing to a motion to proceed to the budget resolution amendment on Thursday night. Nearly a day of debate followed before the vote series was initiated. So there you go. During this type of voting series, senators of both parties can introduce an unlimited number of amendments, and many actually get floor votes. So not a single amendment was adopted through the roughly 6 hours long vote series. Some notable measures. Here's some of the amendments, okay? Senator Bernie Sanders wanted to raise the federal minimum wage to $17 over a period of 5 years. An amendment by Chuck Schumer wanted to limit many of Trump's tariffs. And there was actually a bipartisan amendment that was aimed at blocking the reconciliation bill from making cuts to Medicaid. Anyway, well, the whole thing passed, so that's good. Now, keep in mind, that's just the Senate. Okay? That's just the Senate. It still needs to go to the House. And there was a stark disagreement between Republicans in the House and the Senate on how to organize a budget reconciliation resolution. The House GOP leaders preferred a single bill, one big, beautiful bill, if you recall, with both border and taxes included, while those in the Senate wanted to have 2 separate resolutions for them. Now, here's the thing. The House Republicans have passed a framework that closely resembles this one that just passed. But the problem here, of course, is that they still have to be reconciled. So this is part of the issue. So some of the, despite the similarity between the two, they still have to be reconciled. Okay. And so House conservatives, and it's not clear on this, House conservatives will have to accept the Senate plan on its face, or basically the 2 houses have to come up with some sort of a consensus on what to change. So the Senate did permanently extend the Trump tax cuts, and extending those is likely to be one of the biggest points of contention between the House bill and the Senate bill. So, yeah, the House Budget Committee's Republican majority wrote on X just before the Senate kicked off the vote series. Cutting taxes without cutting spending doesn't reduce taxes. It merely shifts the burden, or the tax burden, to our children. We have a generational opportunity and may be our last to get our fiscal house in order. Well, they're not wrong about that. They're not wrong about that. Cutting taxes without cutting, cutting taxes without cutting spending is sort of like you getting a job for less pay and not cutting back on your credit card usage. Okay, for an example. So, yeah. Now, Trump did express support for the Senate framework earlier this week, saying or mentioning in an unrelated event, if we get this done, it will be the most incredible bill ever passed in the history of our Congress. So, yeah. Anyway, we're going to have to see what the reconciliation actually looks like, but at least they're close. At least they're close to one another. I mean, that's good. They don't have to go through a huge deal, but it looks like the tax cuts are going to be the major piece that is going to be pushed on. All right. Let's see here. Let's take a quick break before I move on to the next. Make sure that's. Yeah. Let's go ahead and take a quick break here. Let's talk about being naked. And no, I'm not talking about being without clothes. Anyway, what I'm talking about is for you men. In today's society, it's tough to be a man in a world dominated by the overly masculine liberal women. That's just not how it is meant to be. Everywhere we look, it's gender neutral, this product, or made for her, that product, which is why they started a company that embodies the ethos of men's lives matter too. With products that aren't designed to be gender neutral or used by people with pronouns. Our products at Rumble are designed and built for men, by men, period. So, if you struggle with low energy, mood swings, or hair loss, or if you need to just perform better at the gym, maybe even in bed, boys, and recover quickly after, throw out all of your other garbage supplements and try animal organs. They are traditionally the most nutrient-rich supplements on the planet. Our bison organs are a step above. The grass-fed, non-vaccinated bison are a species where the weak are allowed to die and only the strongest survive. So, here is Rumble's commitment to you. From men who have real confidence in their products. Try this today. And if you don't like it, fine. Return it for a refund. Go to benaked.com. That's benaked.com. Use promo code STUDIO. That's STUDIO. And get 15% off your order today. Once again, that's go to benaked, benaked.com, benaked.com. Use promo code STUDIO and get 15% off your order today. That's benaked.com, promo code STUDIO, and get 15% off. Go and check them out. Check it, give it a try. It might work for you. That should change your life, and of course, keep in mind that it's for men. benaked.com, promo code STUDIO, and get 15% off today. All right. So, we had a wonderful vote here recently where we won, I'm going to say a 50-50 shot. We won in Florida, meaning conservatives. Conservatives won in Florida, and we didn't really do so hot over in Wisconsin with the Supreme Court. We we lost to get a conservative, or a liberal leftist lunatic onto the court. Which, by the way, I don't know if anybody knew this, but I think it's a female majority court there in Wisconsin. But anyway, and by the way, if you look at the pictures, they're all white women. Okay. Not saying anything about that. But here in the Populist Times, they did find that 3 GOP states, and once again, I already talked a little bit about this, but Idaho, Missouri, and now Iowa have uncovered over 300,000 ineligible voters in their voting registers, including inactive, disqualified, deceased, non-citizen, or duplicate voters. The discovery raises serious questions about the situation in deep blue states that keep fighting tooth and nail for any attempt to scrutinize voters. It also coincided with the DOJ finding illegal immigrants in voter rolls and recommending them for prosecution. You recall we talked about that on this program for that. So on March 14th, Missouri's Secretary of State Denny Hoskins worked with the local election authorities to remove 18,637 deceased voters from the state's voter rolls. The state also found an additional 133,520 inactive voters and an additional 4,000 others who were disqualified for various reasons, including being duplicated, incapacitated, convicted of a felony, or having been relocated from the state. On March 19th, Idaho Secretary of State Phil McGrain removed 144,121 ineligible voters who were either inactive, ineligible, or had relocated. The state sent individual notices to the affected voters before removing them from the state's voter rolls to avoid any complaints. The cleanup exercise also intended to ensure that only U.S. citizens could vote in line with the state's executive order called the Only Citizens Will Vote Act. On March 20th, Iowa's Secretary of State, Paul Pate, also disclosed that 277 non-citizens were found in the state's voter rolls. Surprisingly, 35 of those 277 successfully voted in the 2024 election. Wait a minute. I thought that illegals, non-citizens, couldn't vote in elections, in federal elections. Apparently, an additional 5 attempted but failed to cast their ballot. 15 of those who had successfully voted returned absentee ballots. Oh. Vote by mail. Yeah, I seem to recall there was a New York Times article that talked about voting by mail being a window for fraud. Yeah. Anyway, and then all of the illegal votes successfully cast were counted. So, once again, I thought that stuff didn't happen. I thought our elections were like completely secure. They were, safe, secure, had no issues, so on and so forth. Or at least that's what the Democrats have been trying to make you believe for God knows how long. Well, anyway, another 22 had also registered to vote in Iowa, but didn't attempt to cast their ballots. However, 2,186 non-citizens could have registered, voted, or attempted to cast their ballots if the Hawkeye state could not access the Systemic Alien Verification for Entitlements, also known as the SAVE program, to compare citizenship data with the Department of Transportation. Ironically, Washington, D.C. had later denied the state of Iowa access to the immigration data for clarification, hampering its effort to clean the voting roll register. Nonetheless, all cases of attempted voter fraud have been referred for investigation. Yeah, I thought none of this stuff, happened. I just I thought it never occurred. Yeah. Once again, if a leftist lunatic says it's not happening, chances are they're also saying in the back of their mind, but it's good that it is. Yeah. Anyway. Now, this kind of action, of course, is unlikely to happen in blue states, which obviously have much more lax voter identification laws and, of course, harbor more illegal immigrants who are likely to attempt to vote. Attempt to vote? What do you mean? These people go around and they freaking sign them up. Come on. Really? Really? I mean, here in the state of Washington, I had my voter registration was done, several decades ago. I think at least 2. And I've been here in the state since 1994. And I've voted. Maybe not in every single election, but I definitely have voted. And then, of course, we've gone to all mail-in balloting, which relies on signatures. Now, I can tell you that my signature today does not look like my signature from 20 years ago. Gotten older, gotten sloppier, and believe me, I don't know how they sit there and they say that everything works. But, yeah. Anyway, so if you recall, Trump signed on March 25th the Preserving and Protecting the Integrity of American Elections executive order. And that was supposed to protect our elections. It highlighted how the United States, of course, lags behind other countries, including developing nations and democracies such as India and Brazil, that have robust identification mechanisms such as biometrics, while the most powerful democracy, no, we're a republic, relies on self-attestation. Now, the sad part about this is that, remember those blue states that I mentioned that were unlikely to audit their own voter rolls? That were unlikely to jump on the idea that voting with voter ID is, something that everybody realistically, for the most part, already has, because, I mean, there's a list, and I've told you this before, there's a list of like 20 or 30 things in everyday life that you have to have a photo ID for. Purchasing alcohol is one of them. Right here. And also certain medicines are requiring voter ID and things like that. Okay. But apparently blue states can't stand the fact that somebody is trying to stand up and secure our elections. Here in LifeZette, blue states sue Trump because apparently voter ID is just too much to ask for. Yeah. So there's a coalition of 19 Democrat-led states that filed a federal lawsuit on Thursday last week challenging President Donald Trump's executive order that mandates proof of U.S. citizenship in order to vote in federal elections. Now, the lawsuit was brought by many attorneys general from the following states: Arizona, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Illinois, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, Minnesota, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Rhode Island, Vermont, and even Wisconsin. They all have asked the court to block key provisions that are a part of that March 25th executive order. You know, I'm actually kind of surprised that Washington isn't on that. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if our new governor, Bob Ferguson, Sideshow Bob, is not sitting there going, man, I should have jumped on that when I had the chance, you know. Not that he sounds like that. I don't even know what he sounds like. I can't even listen to the guy. But he used to be our attorney general, and then he became our governor because we have a bunch of morons that vote in this state that can't get on board with anything right and proper. Anyway, in the filing, the states are arguing that Trump's order oversteps constitutional limits by asserting federal authority over elections, a responsibility that they say lies primarily with state governments and Congress. Well, they're not wrong. It does primarily reside with state governments and Congress. However, there's only one problem with this. Congress does not have the power to execute the laws. Okay? That is solely within the power of the presidency. So if the president is looking at the law and the law is very written in terms of it, which actually all he's doing here, honestly, is he's just asking for proof that you're a U.S. citizen. Because we know that U.S. citizens are the only ones that are allowed to vote in federal elections. So I'm not exactly sure how much traction this is going to get within the legal community. I mean, because of the fact that, again, he is attempting to enact the law, which essentially says that only U.S. citizens can vote in federal elections. He's just basically saying, well, in order for me to prove, or in order for me to know for certain that I'm enforcing the law that only U.S. citizens are voting in our elections, I have to have some sort of proof, which is essentially voter ID. Now, keep in mind, Buddy over on Rumble, who is always a stalwart individual, chock full of information. He basically pulls out the means and manner of elections are determined by the legislatures of the several states. And that is true. There is carve-outs, however, for Congress. Congress has certain responsibilities as well as the state legislatures. And so because of that, it is a shared responsibility between the states and the Congress. But unfortunately, none of that really applies to the question at hand, which is essentially whether or not citizens are the ones to vote versus anyone being able to vote, which is a separate part of the Constitution. And again, I point back to, if Congress wrote a very poor law about citizens voting, then it's up to the president to essentially enforce that law. He either has to go back to Congress and say, hey, you guys need to clear this up for me, or he puts it out and then we go to court over it, which is essentially what he's doing with all of this. So the lawsuit further claims that the order infringes upon the role of Congress by attempting to legislate through executive action. And again, I don't see where he's attempting to legislate. I think he's basically doing what all those bureaucratic, bureaucracies, I should say, that have been, legislating from their ability to, for an example, the EPA or the ATF or, any number of government bureaucracies that have basically legislated through regulations in the past. Even the Chevron deference that got turned over was all sitting there, again, legislating through regulation, because the Congress has written poor laws. Thankfully, the Supreme Court overruled that whole Chevron deference idea. But that's basically the entire situation, is that I actually believe that this is more of a President Trump is attempting to clarify what the law already says. Now, I could be completely wrong on all of this, and of course, we'll find that out once it goes through the judicial process. But again, keeping in mind that this is a situation that is also going to go in front of the Supreme Court. And yes, buddy, I do understand that showing ID does not prove citizenship. However, and this is one of my arguments that I've been making, because driver's licenses in several states across the country are just handed out to whoever. So I think that should automatically discount the idea of using a state driver's license as a proper form of identification. The only form of identification that essentially is out there that also checks and verifies citizenship right now in this country is the U.S. passport or the Real ID, because the Real ID Act also did that. For an example, my enhanced driver's license, that's what they call it here in the state of Washington, my enhanced driver's license allows me to get across the border on land or sea. I can't fly internationally with it, but I certainly can get across like the Canadian border or the Mexican border with it, because of the fact that the enhanced identification follows along with the Real ID Act, which applies the rule of verification of citizenship in order to be able to get it. But again, all of that, throwing all of that aside, I think that the passport, the U.S. passport, is the only one that should be allowed. So that basically means that everybody should have a U.S. passport. And even the Real ID Act isn't fully implemented yet. There have been several states, mine included, meaning Washington, that have dragged their feet on changing their driver's licenses to match up with the Real ID Act. But again, if whatever ID you are about ready to use does not have a categorization for confirming proof of citizenship, it should not be allowed as an ID to vote, in my humble opinion. So, yeah, there you go. That's it. All right. So Trump's executive order, just to be clear, states that requires states to implement citizenship verification for voters in federal elections, and prohibits, of course, foreign nationals from participating in or influencing U.S. elections. This has been, there is nothing to argue over that. I mean, that honestly, that policy has been in place for, generations. There's never once been an argument over that. That's part of the reason why the presidency is actually differentiated from being a congressman or House of Representatives, whether it's a representative or a senator, by the idea that the president has to be what is classified as a natural born citizen versus just residing within the states for a certain amount of time. So there are differences there that definitely need to be clarified across the board for all of that. All right. Moving on to our next topic. I love it when people have principles and they throw their principles out. And by that, I mean they put them out in public, meaning that they have the wherewithal to basically say, look, I am not going to compromise my principles just to gain X, whatever X is. So I don't know if anybody's heard on this, but there was a female fencer at a USA fencing event who essentially protested the fact that her opponent was a man. Yes, a man in the women's division. That individual apparently had fenced last year as a man and then swapped over to the women's division just this year. Well, here's some video on it, and I'm going to voice over a little bit because there's not a lot of sound here other than background noise of the actual competition. As you can see in the video here, and I'm doing this for the audio listeners, but as you can see in the video here, they're in some sort of a gymnasium. They've got multiple setups. This is a tournament that's going on. And basically what's happening here is she goes and she starts the match. She's looking at the individual. She goes ahead and backs up. They put their masks on, whatever those masks are, and then she takes a knee and takes her mask off and puts her sword into a down position, not in the ready position. Now, a referee comes over and she talks to her, and she is, I mean, I'm not going to play the entire video, but basically she is issued what is considered to be a black card. Okay, a black card. Now, the opponent comes over to talk to her about what's going on. Like, are you injured? She recounted later that this gentleman came over and said, "Hey, are you injured? Are you hurt? What's the problem? Why are you stopping?" And she basically told him, "No, it's because you're a male competitor." Now, if you look at this gentleman, he stands a good head and shoulders taller than his opponent. Now, I don't know if anybody understands fencing. I certainly don't, but I can tell you when it comes to sword fighting, reach, sword fighting, boxing, things like that, reach makes a big difference. And so anyway, she's sitting there waiting, and the official or the official went over to the other officials and started talking to them to kind of understand, what the hell are we going to do here? And basically what ends up happening, and I won't go through the whole thing because, like I said, it's a 2-minute video here, but she has taken a knee and has decided to not compete because of this. Now, the resulting factor, because of all that, the result has essentially, they go and U.S. Fencing apparently has now expelled her because she refused to compete against this individual. Now, they have put out an announcement on April 3rd from the professional organization of USA Fencing, and it says, USA Fencing remains committed to fostering an inclusive, respectful community for everyone in our sport. We believe in the principle of creating safe communities where all athletes and community members have a place. While we understand there are a range of perspectives, USA Fencing will continue to engage in respectful, research-based dialogue and review as policy evolves in the Olympic and Paralympic movement, as well as domestic law. Hate speech or targeted hate of any kind is not acceptable, online or in person. Let's keep the conversation respectful and the strip, meaning the fencing strip, welcoming to all. Well, she essentially ended up forfeiting her match. She was kicked out of the competition, and now, as you just heard, was kicked out of USA Fencing completely. Well, now USA Fencing is taking a few hits about this, and they are defending their decision. They're defending themselves. USA Fencing is defending themselves over the policy of including transgender fencers in the women's category and punishing a female athlete for refusing to face that trans opponent. Okay, I'm just going to ask this very simple question, okay? A very simple question, which is essentially this. Why is it that there are males infiltrating female sports, but we are not hearing a single instance of a female infiltrating male sports? Why? And I am going to answer to you which is a very simple question or a very simple answer, because a woman, even some of the more powerful and skilled women, moving into a male-dominated sport, they can't compete. It's plain and simple, honestly. It is plain and simple. I mean, you see examples of it every day. Well, not every day, but you see examples of it everywhere. For an example, and I can't remember which Williams sister it was, whether it was, I think it was Serena. Serena Williams played the 200th ranked male player and lost 6 straight sets. There was not even a chance for her to get up there. You have Riley Gaines, who is a huge advocate for women's sports and for keeping men out of women's sports. And Riley Gaines clearly stated, look, my boyfriend, who isn't like the top-ranked player or top-ranked swimmer, can beat me every single day and twice on Sundays. This is exactly why. This is exactly why you don't see women infiltrating men's sports. If a woman who wants to be considered a man infiltrated a man's sport, okay, they aren't going to make it. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry. There is scientific proof and evidence that a woman cannot stand up to or stack up to the same physicality as a man in a physical sport. It's just not going to happen. Wooden's brought up a good point, or G, I should say, brought up a good point, because this is one of the things, the Billie Jean King that was famous, Billie Jean King Battle of the Sexes back in the day. Well, Billie Jean King was pretty close to her prime, okay? And Bobby Riggs, okay? Billie Jean King almost lost to Bobby Riggs, and Bobby Riggs was actually a has-been. A has-been. Okay? And I mean, this is the point. Again, I mean, it has nothing to do with what is or isn't fair. If you want a woman to play, if a woman wants to play in a man's sport, okay, you're not going to survive. I mean, even and I'm not being like, I'm not being mean here. I really am not. I'm just stating simple facts. Because even the Dallas under-15 boys soccer team defeated the national women's U.S. soccer team like 5-0 or something. And these were boys that hadn't even reached full maturity yet. Under 15 basically means they were 14-year-old boys, minimum. Okay? I mean, this is ridiculous. It is totally ridiculous to sit here and expect women, by the way, women, okay, are being replaced by men. Talk about the patriarchy. Talk about the patriarchy. You know, women's feminism was standing up against the patriarchy, and yet here you are sitting back, and I'm talking to the feminists here. You're sitting back and you're just allowing the patriarchy to run roughshod all over your spaces because of the fact that you lack the courage to stand up and say, no, this is wrong. Anyway, once again, I am very proud. Personally, very proud of the fact that there are people who are standing up for their principles. They are standing up for what is actually right, not what is socially acceptable. All right, before I get into my next group, I'm going to do one more break, one more advertisement here for 5G free. So I want to talk about the things that people are afraid to say out loud. Who is in control of America's nukes? Well, we now know it's Donald Trump, which is cool. But when Biden was in there, it wasn't Biden. All right. It definitely was not Biden. Meanwhile, we, at the time, under the Biden administration, we had Russian ships off the coast of Florida and full-blown wars in Ukraine and Israel, which are still going on today, even though Donald Trump is attempting to finish those off. The world, of course, is at its most unstable point since World War II, and with nuclear weapons. The stakes today are even 10 times higher. How do people like you and I stay safe? Well, every prepper needs to have what's called Radio Guard ACE, the only FDA-approved drug to treat radioactive fallout. Only the federal government had it until now. That's why Rumble partnered with what's called 5G Free, the only company in the world that has a supply of Radio Guard ACE and the ability to prescribe it prophylactically. Get their radiation emergency kit with Radio Guard ACE, potassium iodide, Zofran, and a Geiger counter. Altogether, there's simply no other tool in your arsenal to protect against a radioactive event. Go to 5gfree.com. That's 5-G, as in golf, -free, FREE.com. Use promo code STUDIO to save 15% off your order and get your radiation kit today. That's 5-G-free.com. Use promo code STUDIO and get 15% off of your radiation kit. Once again, that's 5-G, as in golf, -free.com, and use promo code STUDIO to save 15% and get your radiation kit today. All right. So, last things, Trump, of course, is attempting to tell people about his wonderful actions against the Houthis. He went ahead and shared a video out about an airstrike. Let's go ahead and take a look at this video. It's about 25 seconds long or so. And you can kind of see there's no sound with it, but you can kind of see whatever, there was a drone or whatever above, and it was circling around a group of people in a ring, and the bomb hit, and it immediately vaporized all of the people that were there. Pictures later afterward show essentially just a crater in the space. So, yeah, it was, there's the photo right here of the people, whoever these are. I'm assuming these are the Houthis, but there it is. They're in sort of a ring. They're talking or something, but the drone is way up high, and it went ahead and dropped a bomb about it. And Monday, Trump wrote on Truth Social that the Houthis have been decimated by relentless strikes over the past 2 weeks. He said many of their fighters and leaders are no longer with us. We hit them every day and night, harder and harder. Their capabilities that threaten shipping in the region are rapidly being destroyed, he says. Our attacks will continue as they are no longer, or until they are no longer a threat to freedom of navigation. The choice for the Houthis is clear. Stop shooting at U.S. ships and we will stop shooting at you. Otherwise, we have only just begun, and the real pain is yet to come, for both the Houthis and their sponsors in Iran. Well, Iran has responded to the Houthis being bombed by the United States, and Real Clear Defense here has it right here at the top. You can see this wonderful headline: Iranian personnel leave Yemen as U.S. strikes intensify. This is what happens when you have a proper president, a proper commander-in-chief. So Iran has ordered its military personnel to leave Yemen amidst the ongoing U.S. bombing campaign in the country. The Telegraph reported this on April 3rd. The newspaper source added that regime officials' concerns over the Trump administration have eclipsed discussions on Tehran's regional proxies, dominating every single meeting and sidelining previous strategic priorities. The move is in part of a broader pattern of the Islamic Republic recalibrating its regional strategy in response to the Trump administration's efforts to curtail Tehran's influence in the Middle East and threats to potentially strike Iran's nuclear sites. Iran had previously urged the Houthis to cool tensions in the Red Sea on March 18th, with Iranian officials claiming the request was conveyed to the Houthi envoy in Tehran and that Iran asked Oman to also communicate the same message. The U.S. has launched extensive military campaign against the Tehran-backed Houthi terrorist group in Yemen. Daily attacks since March 15th, but we don't see this in the mainstream media. We're not seeing any of this in the mainstream media. We don't see anybody talking about this. So he has effectively attacked the Houthis, is working on securing the Red Sea, bringing the Red Sea back under control because the Houthis sort of had the opportunity to take it over because, of course, Biden administration wasn't doing anything about it. And yet now it looks like he actually has these trainers and these advisors who are from Iran are moving away from the Yemen-backed or the Yemen located Houthis. So they're starting to move out, which is fantastic. Now, for those of you who are out there, just as a side note as we end tonight's episode, for those of you that are out there who think that, allowing people in unvetted, uncontrolled into our country is a fantastic thing. Here, take an example from Spain. Apparently, according to reports that is circulating, half of Spain's female murder victims were perpetrated by migrants, folks. Half of Spain's female murder victims were by migrants. So this is Spain now. This is in Europe, folks, where the migrant population is taking over there. Now, the migrants that they call out in this report are most of them are particularly from Arab/Muslim migrants. They are, by reports, supposed to be the religion of peace, but that's not the case. That's not the case. So the idea of bringing thousands of foreigners who practice a different religion and come from a culture that encourages exploitation, violence, rape, murder, all of which the Islamic holy texts explicitly endorse, okay? Explicitly endorse. To think that it wasn't going to create a crime crisis, yeah, that's a fallacy in your logic and thinking here, folks. So, yeah. This is just one example. Half of Spain's female murder victims came from migrants. All right, folks, that is it for me for this evening. Do me a favor, if you haven't already, head on over to rumble.com, get yourself an account. It is free, and once you are signed up and signed in, click that green follow button to get notified every time I go live. Also, don't forget, next week, Monday, I should have a show. Tuesday, I'm not going to have a show. Wednesday is up in the air. Thursday looks like it's likely possible for a show. Friday may be up in the air. Saturday may be up in the air. So next week, because of my trip to Texas and the launching of the Dallas Moore Outlaw Radio, just keep in mind there might be some changes and stuff. So keep flexible, folks. I will do everything that I can to keep all of you informed. All right. We will see you Monday night, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on American Perspective. Have a great rest of your evening, and good night, everybody.